All right. Hello, everybody. I hope you are doing well. Thanks for joining me on this Thursday night. And as always, if you like what you're about to see, you can go right here, patreon.com/Hemant to support what I do. You can also subscribe for free or not, if you feel like it, at friendlyatheist.com. We have Den here who's going to help out in the comment thread and make sure I see everything I need to see in between stories. So please leave your questions and whatnot, and we'll get to them between stories. And I'm going to get right into it because there's so many stories I want to discuss, and hopefully you find them interesting as well. I want you to see this headline from the Seattle Times because this is one of the better stories I have seen in recent memory when it comes to church-state separation. And just check out what this looks like right here. Washington clergy may be required to report child abuse disclosed in confession. And if you look at the date on this, it's from January of 2025. And I bring this up because there is some good news involved in this story. But basically, the whole state of Washington is now a governor's signature away from adopting a law that would require clergy members, Catholic priests, Jehovah's Witness elders, Mormon leaders, etc. They would have to report incidents of abuse against children, and they would have to report it to law enforcement authorities, even if they learned about it through the act of confession. And that little bit right there is something you don't see very often, and that's why this bill is so important. So let's talk about this, because what this bill does is it adds members of the clergy to the list of mandated reporters in the state. And I know we've talked about this before, but basically, public school teachers are mandated reporters, counselors may be mandated reporters. And what that means is, you know, if you're a public school teacher and a kid confides in you and says, at home, I am the victim of abuse or something because they trust you or something like that, you don't get to keep that a secret. You are required by law to tell a higher up. Maybe at your school, it's a counselor or someone like that, but eventually it's going to go to law enforcement. And the reason is we have an obligation to protect those children. The problem that we have seen in recent years is that one group of people who are not mandated reporters are priests. And specifically, what happens if they are taking confession? They're in the confessional booth, and some dude walks in and says, I've committed a sin. I need atonement of sorts. I need to know how to get this guilt off my chest. And the priest is like, what have you done? And the answer is, well, I've been hurting this child. And in theory, that's horrible, and they should be reported to law enforcement. But what's been happening in a lot of Catholic churches is they say, well, that's not great. Say a few Hail Marys, have a great day. Like, that doesn't do anything, and the abuse continues. And we have seen reports of abusers who go to confession because they need to get this off their chest. And the priest doesn't take that information beyond the confessional booth. And then the abuse just continues because no one has stopped this person. And the reason priests, and I'm mentioning Catholics here because they're usually at the center of the scandal, but it applies to the Mormon Church and Jehovah's Witnesses and groups like that too. The reason they say we cannot tell anybody about this abuse is because they're doing it in the act of confession. Confidentiality, they say, is at the heart of what they do, and it's such an important ritual in their religious community that breaking that seal of confidentiality would like make baby Jesus cry. And that would be a sin worse than death. And so they don't want to report it. And they would rather have the abuse continue than be forced by the government to report that abuse to law enforcement. And so this is a loophole that needs to be closed. And so what this bill in Washington did is it says, we don't care if you're clergy and we don't care if it's an act of confession. You still got to report anything you might know about the abuse of children. Now, I should tell you, one of the arguments that Catholic lobbyists have made is that, come on, other professions are allowed to have a seal of confidentiality. If you're a lawyer and you have a client, there is attorney-client privilege. If you're a doctor and a patient, there is privilege there. There's confidentiality assumed. That's actually not true. The law says, even in Washington, that if it involves the abuse of children, even doctors and lawyers do not get to keep that a secret. So this would only extend that to the act of confession. Now, I made a video about this a few months ago when they introduced this bill, because the person who introduced it was a state senator named Noelle Frame. And when she filed versions of this bill in the past, they wouldn't go anywhere. And she kept having to make compromises she didn't want to make, because they might say, okay, priests can be mandated reporters, but if they hear about it in the confessional booth, that's got to slide, which is like, well, that's kind of the whole point. We can't remove that. That's kind of the reason we're doing all this. One version, I'll give you an example of what she did. One version of a bill she sponsored in 2023 said that if priests suspect abuse and then it's confirmed in the confessional booth, then they have to report it to authorities. But if they only learn about the abuse through confession, like solely through confession, the priests are allowed to keep it a secret. She did not want to do that, but that is the only compromise some people would agree to. And again, you get the idea here, which is that there is some way for priests to keep their knowledge of abuse a secret. And I don't think that's what anyone wants. That is definitely not in the best interest of children. The irony of that bill, the 2023 one, is that when they were getting ready to pass that already watered down bill, the Attorney General in Washington announced that 3 dioceses in Washington were being investigated for sexual abuse by clergy members. And a bunch of lawmakers said, you know what? We don't want any exemptions for priests, which is great, but they ran out of time to pass the bill. I also want to show you, and I know I've played this before, but I want to show you what Noelle Frame said during a hearing at the time, because you know what? Screw it. I'll play it again. It's important.
I will say that the bill fell apart last year after the revelation that the Catholic, 3 separate archdioceses of the Catholic Church were being investigated, which was not able to be corroborated until after legislative session last year, but that became public. And quite frankly, it made it hard for me at a personal level to stomach any argument about religious freedom being more important than preventing the abuse, including the sexual abuse of children. Because everybody that's been following this bill knows that this one is personal for me as a survivor of sexual abuse myself, and abuse that only stopped when I told a mandated reporter, which was a teacher. So I have tried really hard over the last couple of years to find a balance and to strike a careful compromise. And I'm just here to say, for those who I've tried to work with, I'm really sorry that I don't feel like I can make a compromise for you anymore. And I stand by the bill with no exemption.
So she's amazing. She's been trying to get this passed with no exceptions, no confession loophole or anything like that. And honestly, what she said right there, that's the sort of courage I wish we could see from all lawmakers when dealing with predatory cover-ups from religious leaders. Like, you cannot compromise with people who are willing to throw victims of abuse under the bus because their mythology demands it. Okay? Now, one of the other things I want to point out here, because again, I've made a video about this in the past, one of the arguments made by the Archdiocese of Seattle is that it would be impossible for priests to comply with this bill because the penalty for breaking the seal of confession is excommunication. Which, who the hell cares? Like, if you would rather protect priests than kids, your organization is the problem. In no rational world is getting excommunicated worse than letting a child continue to suffer. Like, where is your morality at that point? Now, here's the good news. Since the last time I talked about this, the no compromise version of this bill passed in the state Senate 28-20, and then it moved over to the state House. And last week, the House passed this bill. And that's 2 hurdles we have not seen before, which is amazing. Now, There were Republicans in the House who did not want this bill to pass, and they had a long, long debate over whether all these Republicans made arguments about why they want to defend faith-based sexual abuse cover-ups. Like, for example, Republicans introduced amendments to this bill that would basically take out the heart of it. They said, okay, priests are mandated reporters, but confessions don't count, which, again, no, that's not the point. I want to play for you what one of these Republicans said. His name is Jeremy Dufo, which sounds like doofus because it's accurate. And he basically said the Catholic Church should be let off the hook here because, you guys, the church has helped a lot of people. Who cares if there's a few gazillion bad eggs out there doing horrible things to kids? Who cares if some abuser comes to the confession booth and a priest says, all right, your secret's safe with me? Because think of all the good the church does. And then he used some of his time to try to convert people to Christianity because that's how he felt he would win this argument. Let me play you this clip.
Every religion has made mistakes. The parishioners of every religion have made mistakes. That does not define the religion. Mr. Speaker, this bill is an attack on the Catholic and other faiths. The Catholic faith has helped billions of people around the world do good for their neighbors, their states, their communities, their families. Talking about negative instances that have happened and need to be addressed and need to be fixed do not define the Catholic faith. Do not define the billions of people who practice the Catholic faith today around the world and the hundreds of billions, perhaps even trillions, who have practiced it throughout history. The belief in Jesus Christ has the ability to change and save the world. And a government does not have the ability or the authority under the state constitution or the U.S. Constitution to undermine that or attack that in any way. Vote no on this bill.
There's so many things he said there that are ridiculous, but I think my favorite is that the Catholic Church has helped perhaps even trillions of people throughout history, which is off by like a factor of a lot. He also argued this bill is an attack on the Catholic faith, which, again, think about what this bill is doing. All we want to do is protect children from suffering. And this guy's like, that would hurt Catholicism. Just repeat that one in your head and think about what he's actually saying there. Ridiculous. Also, if Jesus is so damn powerful, as this dude said, then a bill protecting children from abuse should not be an issue for him. Like, it's kind of telling that this guy thinks protecting kids would undermine and attack the Catholic Church. And again, the good news here is that the Washington State House said, you know what? We listened to what you just said, and we don't care. And they passed this bill, no compromises anyway. Now, I think one person asked this question in the comments right now, which is, what happens if someone does confess to abuse and a priest doesn't do anything? Are they actually going to be punished for this? And the answer is yes. And I want to show you, this is from the Seattle Times, but because priests would now be mandated reporters, including in the confessional booth, check out what this actually means here. Here we go. Mandated reporters are required to report suspicions of abuse within 48 hours. And those who are required but fail to do that are guilty of a gross misdemeanor, which can carry a sentence of up to 1 year in prison and a $5,000 fine. So there would be a punishment for the priests who decide their mystical belief that confession is like a cone of silence and no information can pass through it. If you believe that more than let me help the kids, you could go to jail, which is really how it should be. I spoke to Marino Hardin, who is a former Jehovah's Witness who testified in support of this bill. And they told me they witnessed, quote, multiple cases of child abuse being ignored while growing up in the Jehovah's Witness religion. But in a response to the House passing this bill, this is what Marino said to me. Today, after 3 years of effort, I am incredibly grateful that Washington state lawmakers have finally passed common sense mandatory reporting laws into law. I am grateful that there will be far fewer children going without help and far fewer repeat abusers moving from kingdom hall to kingdom hall, venue to venue, leaving a trail of hurt individuals behind them. So fantastic news on that front. The only thing left now is for the Democratic governor, Bob Ferguson, to sign this bill. I have no reason to think Ferguson is not going to sign this bill. The only wrinkle to that is that Ferguson is Catholic. I don't know if that's really an issue for him at this point, because this is the right thing to do. And the people I've spoke to who are familiar with this bill do not think he's going to veto this either. But if he signs it, and I hope he does, that will mean Washington is a place where formal confessions of sexual abuse are no longer exempt from mandatory reporting laws. And do you know what Washington would join? Which other places also say confession is not a loophole? It's now going to be Washington, New Hampshire, West Virginia, and Guam. Those are the states and territory where confession is not some sort of exemption from the law. So anyway, fantastic news from Washington. I assume the governor is going to sign this bill. I hope that happens. So just yay, for once, something nice happened. It's important. It shouldn't have taken years for this to get done, but it's finally going to get done. All right, I'm going to pause there for now. What questions we have over here? But first, you'd have to teach them what the definition of abuse is, because they don't seem to know. I know maybe the Catholic Church needs to do a little bit of training to explain to these priests that abuse means kid says no. I don't know how serious they want to go, but we'll see. Oh, thanks for that donation. Maybe baby Jesus should be allowed to cry himself to sleep once in a while. Hey, gang. I mean, seriously, think about what they are trying to protect here. I don't understand it. The only thing that happens if this bill is passed is that more kids get protected. No one cares about the religious rules about confession. That is not the government's business. This is an obvious thing for them to do. So, yeah, let baby Jesus cry over it. Let the kids be safe. The faith is not the problem in this instance. It's the institution of the church. He's equating the two. Yeah, talking about Dufo giving his speech. Yeah, I agree. This is not about Catholicism. This is not an attack on Catholicism. No one's saying you can't be a Catholic or you can't be a priest in the Catholic Church. This is saying the institution is saying you're not allowed to tell higher authorities about abuse that you learned through the act of confession. Guess what? Then ignore the institution and do the right thing. Tell people, because it's in the best interest of the kids. That's not an attack on Catholicism. The only people afraid are the guilty ones. And honestly, it's not even like the priests in this case, in this story, are not the bad guys necessarily. They're just the ones hearing the confessions. But if you hear something that's going to put people in danger, yeah, you have an obligation to tell people about it so that people don't get hurt. I don't know why this is complicated. But because the Catholic Church does not require priests to do the right thing, it's up to the government to make them do the right thing. Relevant question. How many dioceses are there in Washington? That's a good question. I actually don't know the answer off the top of my head. There can't be that many, more than 3, right? I don't know. Maybe someone can Google that and give us the answer. I don't know without trying to look it up myself right here. But again, those were 3 dioceses that had priests who were accused of sexual abuse. So it's not like they have 100. What's the history of the confessional? I have a suspicion that it was to gather info and leverage on nobles. That's a good theory. I don't know the history of the confessional. I'm very curious now, but I don't have that in front of me. Anything else there? Oh, there are only 3 dioceses. So all of them have predators. There you go. That's disturbing. All right, subscribe at Friendly Atheist. I'm going to move on to the next story here. Give me one moment. Okay. This is a story where so many people started sending me links to an article about this because they read the headline and they're like, wait a minute. And I want to tell you what's going on here, but I don't want to give away all the fun stuff. But here's the disturbing story. I'm going to start with that. I will get to the reason people are laughing at this story in a second. But here's the disturbing part. In 2021, there was a woman named Miranda Anderson, and she was 34 weeks pregnant. She was so close to giving birth, very excited, I assume, about giving birth because she wanted to have this baby. And when she was 34 weeks pregnant, she started having some complications. And she was quickly transferred to the obstetrics emergency unit at a hospital called Mercy One. That's all one word, Mercy One. It is overseen by the Catholic Health Initiatives Iowa organization, so a Catholic organization based in Iowa. And so she went to the doctors there. She said, I have complications. This is not good. And the doctors looked at her and they kept her at the hospital for 2 days. And they said, you're fine. Go back home. And she's like, okay, great. Everything's okay. A few days later, she goes to see her primary care doctor about all this. And that doctor says, your fetus is no longer viable. So you've miscarried this baby. Devastating news, as anyone who's been through that, or even if you haven't. I mean, just devastating news, not what this family wanted to hear. So what the issue was at this point is that Miranda and her husband Landon said, well, if the doctors at the Catholic hospital had recognized the situation and recommended that she deliver the baby early, which they totally could have done, they could have saved the baby. But they didn't do that. And so the couple sued the hospital for medical malpractice. And obviously Mercy One and the Catholic overseeing organization, they deny there was any malpractice. But this is going through the courts now. And if the lawsuit is successful, the hospital and its parent company could be on the hook for a lot of money. So that's the disturbing part of this story. That's what this case is all about. But this is also where it gets really interesting, because I want to show you this right here. This is Iowa law. And this is something that was passed in 2017. Check out number 2 here. This is what they passed in 2017. And I know it's a lot of legalese, but basically what they're saying is if you sue anyone for medical malpractice, look at the third line in number 2. We're going to limit how much you can get for non-economic damages to $250,000. But the rest of that paragraph says, however, if something so serious happened, a substantial or permanent loss or impairment of a bodily function, substantial disfigurement or death, then you know what? The $250,000 cap does not apply. It could go much higher. Well, this family experienced a death of their fetus. And so the argument here is, okay, you could sue for malpractice, but according to Iowa state law, there's no real ceiling on how much they could sue the hospital for. And if you're the hospital, your argument is, how do we make sure that we don't have to pay out more than $250,000 in non-economic damages for all the trauma and the mental issues that you're going to have to deal with as a result of this, and also for something that could have been prevented. So the hospital's argument is what's fascinating here, because guess what the Catholic hospital's lawyers are now arguing? I want to show you this. I want to find the right thing here. And of course, I'm missing it here. I'm just going to show you the headline from the Iowa Capitol Dispatch. Check this out. Aiming to limit damages, Catholic hospital argues a fetus isn't the same as a person. If you get that, you understand why this is messed up. But the Catholic churches are, now I want to be clear, this is not the Catholic Church. This is just a Catholic-owned company. They're saying, we know the Catholic Church believes you're a human being from the moment of conception. But as a business, A fetus is totally not a person, you guys. So there was no fetal death. We can't count this as a death because a person didn't die. It was a fetus that died. So we can't have a giant, massive payout in the case of medical malpractice because all that died was a fetus. Who cares? That's the lawyer's argument. The lawyers for this Catholic institution. That is what they are arguing. And I know it's funny and I want to laugh, but it really is disturbing that this is the argument they are making here. This is also a point they're trying to make in this article. Let me show you this right here. This is the lawyers. They argue the Iowa legislature did not intend for the loss of a baby prior to delivery to be included within the exemption, and that Anderson's lawyers are attempting to put words in the legislature's mouth. There is no case law, and plaintiffs cite none, finding loss of pregnancy is a loss of impairment of a bodily function. The lawyers are mad that people are counting a fetus as a death, even though that's totally what the Catholic Church preaches. So, just to sum this up, the hospital is saying the loss of a fetus is not the same as the loss of a baby, according to Iowa law. So there's a limit on how much they might have to pay out. And that's what they're going with. Unbelievable. They also said this, which I found funny. In recent court filings, attorneys for Catholic health initiatives and Mercy One argue that finding an unborn child to be a person, can you imagine how crazy that would be? It would lead to serious implications in other areas of the law. You guys, we would screw up the legal system if we said a fetus was a person. Are you kidding me? They also argue the Andersons' unborn child should not be considered a patient for purposes of calculating damages. It was a nothing. It was just a fetus. Nobody cares. And they go on. There's no statute or binding case law finding an unborn child to be a patient. That's what the law says. And they're citing an Iowa Supreme Court ruling in a 71 case that says there can be no recovery of damages on behalf of or for a non-existent person. It's just a fetus, you guys. It's a non-existent person. And who's saying this? The lawyers for the Catholics, the same Catholics who believe every sperm is sacred. And the moment the baby is conceived, it is a living, breathing human being. So again, it's not like the Catholic Church is making this argument. That really would be the height of hypocrisy here. These are lawyers for a Catholic hospital. Those are two different groups. I want to say that out loud, but it is hypocritical. It's not like the hospital is saying, hey, lawyers, maybe don't make that argument because that's not at all what we believe in this here building. But this is the argument they are making in court. And again, none of this should be surprising because as I was looking up this story, you will not believe this. I found another story involving the same Catholic Health Initiatives company. They pulled this shit before. In 2006, get this story. In 2006 in Colorado, there was a woman who was pregnant with twins. She began to feel sick. So she gets in touch with her doctor. Like her on-call doctor did not answer his pager. So she had to get to the hospital. And then she died later that night. And the fetuses died too. And her husband then filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Catholic Health Initiatives, basically saying, my wife might have died no matter what you did, but you could have saved the twins, the fetuses, had you performed an operation. But you were negligent, so I am suing you for wrongful death. And what did the hospital argue in court? This is an article from about that case. Check this out. When the case went to court in Fremont County, lawyers for the multi-state Catholic healthcare network based in the Denver suburb of Inglewood argued successfully that the unborn twins are not considered persons under Colorado law. Therefore, a wrongful death lawsuit has no merit. They've done this before. So it doesn't matter what the Catholic Church teaches about fetuses. These lawyers are like, who cares what the Catholic Church says? We're lawyers. And the law in this state says fetuses don't count as people. So we're running with that. So, no money for anybody. Again, the hypocrisy is unbelievable. I should say in that Colorado case, the Archdiocese of Denver, they said, we don't agree with this legal argument. They said no Catholic institution may legitimately work to undermine fundamental human dignity. But it's not like the Archdiocese could stop the lawyers, because this was a legal issue, not a theological one. So they were like, we don't like what they're doing here, but we can't do anything about it. So again, it makes you wonder, what obligations does a Catholic institution actually have when it comes to Catholic beliefs? Because again, the Catholic Church says life begins at conception. That's why they say abortions are, quote, gravely contrary to the moral law. But apparently, if there's money involved, they have no problem separating a fetus from a newborn as if they are two distinct entities. Like when it comes to a conflict between the law and their principles, they'll go with the one that costs them the least amount of money. Like these Catholic administrators at this medical center are so eager to blame Iowa lawmakers for a lack of clarity than admitting maybe their religious beliefs equating a fetus with a human child are really dumb, because that might mean writing a larger check. I just want to close this with one more story about this, because there is an instance of someone using this hypocrisy to make a different point. You may have heard about this. A few years ago in Texas, there was a woman who was driving by herself on the Texas highway, and she was in the far left lane, the one for high occupancy vehicles. Like you can't drive in that lane unless you have 2 or more passengers in the car, because that's supposed to help with traffic. Like if you're carpooling, great, you can use the fast lane. And she was driving in it by herself, and a cop pulls her over in Texas. And the cop's like, you're driving by yourself. You can't do that. And she's like, excuse me, I'm pregnant. And according to Texas law, this fetus counts as a person, so I am carpooling. She actually got 2 tickets for driving by herself in the carpool lane, and she used the I have a fetus argument twice. And if my understanding of this case is correct, those tickets were eventually tossed out because a judge agreed with her logic. Now, that is clever on that woman's part, but at least she's not here trying to make the hypocritical point. She's just saying, if this is the way you're going to write the stupid law, I'm going to take advantage of it. In the case of the Catholic hospital here, they're saying, who cares what the Catholic Church teaches? We're just following the law, and the law says a fetus isn't a person, so we don't have to pay out as much. So again, this case is going to go to court. It's going to get in front of a jury. They have to decide if there was a wrongful death involved. And if there is, how much money does the hospital have to pay out? And what the hospital is doing right now is saying, okay, the wrongful death may be for a judge and jury to decide. But if you find that there was a wrongful death, we're going to try to minimize how much we have to give that family. That's where we're at right now. But I just look at this headline one more time. Just enjoy how absurd it is. There you go. Aiming to limit damages. Catholic hospital argues a fetus is not the same as a person. That's the Catholic ministry for you. All right, I'm going to stop there for now. What questions do we have? They actually went to, it's just a fetus. Yep. The lawyers for the Catholics are like, just a fetus. Who cares? Yep. What does Iowa law say about abortion? Oh, I should know this, shouldn't I? I don't know where Iowa is at this moment. It's a very Republican state overall. So someone's going to have to help me out with this. I don't want to speak off the cuff here because I don't know. I'm the most pro-choice person I know, and even I consider a 30-some week fetus a baby. That's way past. That's way post-viability. It is post-viability. And so again, the question is, could you have saved the baby? And the answer is, if they took precautions, they could have probably saved this fetus. And so I don't know. I feel like this family has a valid point to make here if they're saying that if they can prove the hospital could have done something about this, but didn't, for whatever their reasons were, it could be a victory for the family. Iowa banned abortions. Okay, there you go. But again, while I appreciate that answer, in this case, the family did not want an abortion. They wanted to have this baby. Medical complications happened, so I think that's outside the scope of any abortion law. But the lawyers speak for the clients, though, and the client is supposed to sign off on whatever the lawyer presents to the court. So no, the hospital is totally on board with this argument. They are. I'm not denying that at all. The hospital is saying this is a fine argument for their lawyers to use, even though it totally contradicts what the Catholic Church teaches. Because apparently, and I know we've joked about this, like there are surveys that show American Catholics are the majority of American Catholics support abortion rights to at least some degree. They support same-sex marriage. Like more than half of them support same-sex marriage. The Catholic Church says the opposite, says absolutely not on both of those. And the question is, well, who gets to speak for the Catholic Church? Is it the people who practice the faith or the Vatican? And the Catholic Church is like, no, it's the Vatican that counts. Who cares what the people say? And in the case of this hospital, apparently what the Vatican says can be ignored because it's cheaper. It's cheaper to say, who cares what the church says? We got a legal argument to make for why we don't have to pay out as much money. I don't know. I feel like if they take the label Catholic, they ought to automatically be associated with that religion. If not, there are some serious questions that need to be answered. I mean, yeah, I am assuming that the hospitals owned by CHI, Catholic Health Initiatives, are not allowed to perform abortions, even in states where it's legal. And they're not allowed to do vasectomies or tubal ligations. And they're not allowed to abort a fetus, in the case of sexual assault. They can't help you with that stuff. So they're willing to follow Catholic dogma when it comes to what they'll perform or not perform. But for some reason, when it involves how much money is going to be paid out, possibly, they're like, who cares what the church says? All right, I'm going to jump to a different story. Give me a second here. Oh, you're going to all hate this one. This is not a good story. Okay. Let me jump to do you all remember this guy? It's been a while since I've talked about him, but for many years, he was like the biggest Christian nationalist politician in the country in the state of Arkansas. His name is Jason Rapert, spelled exactly as you think. And he was in the state Senate in Arkansas for like 12 years. He helped push through ultra-conservative legislation. He installed the Ten Commandments monument outside the Capitol in 2017. He got sued over that, and that case is somehow still in the courts, I believe, to this day. And then in 2022, he's like, you know what? Jesus is on my side. I'm going to run for lieutenant governor. And in Arkansas, the governor and the lieutenant governor run on separate tickets. So he was just by himself, and he's like, I'm going to run for lieutenant governor. And Sarah Huckabee Sanders at the time was running for governor. And he's like, I want to be her running mate. I mean, they didn't run on the same ticket, but that's what he was trying to do. And Republicans in Arkansas are like, dude, we don't like you. And they picked a different MAGA politician to be the lieutenant governor. So all of a sudden, Jason Rapert was no longer in the state legislature. And that's kind of when I stopped really paying attention to this guy because he wasn't writing laws anymore. So what did he do after that? Well, he started this group called the National Association of Christian Lawmakers. He actually started this when he was still in office, but he really poured himself into this work after he left office. And I got to say, as a person who likes wordplay, that's a really good title for the group, NACL, because they believe they are salt of the earth. Get it? Get it? I hate that that's actually a really good acronym for this organization. But anyway, this is what Jason Rapert does. He basically pulls together all of these Christian lawmakers from across the country, and he brings them together, and they all get together in a room, and they hand each other draft legislation. Like, I use this in Mississippi. You ought to use it in your state. And they all trade legislation and give each other high fives. And then I assume have a giant drunken orgy in the hotel room afterwards. I assume that's how it works. But this is what Jason Rapert has been working on for many years now, this group of Christian nationalists. But then in 2023, he returned back to the land of politics because that November 2023, the governor of the state, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, what did she do? She named Jason Rapert to the state library board. And again, look at the date here, November 2023. She named him to the state library board. What is the state library board? This is the organization that basically controls some of the funding that goes to public libraries across the state. And this is a 7-member board. They only meet 4 times a year, once every 3 months. It's not like a huge time commitment here. But the reason, if you're Sarah Huckabee Sanders and you're appointing this dude to the library board, you only do that for one reason, because you want a dude who likes to ban books to be on your state library board. That was his role. It's the same reason Donald Trump appoints the biggest dumbasses to his cabinet, not because he thinks they're going to do a good job. It's because he knows they'll do a shitty job and he doesn't care, and he wants the ideologues to run wild. He's not interested in a functioning government. He wants to destroy it. And that's what he's doing, and that's what Sarah Huckabee Sanders was doing when she appointed this guy to the organization. So what did Jason Rapert do the second he joins this 7-member board? Well, one of the first things he did is he pointed out that there were 3 library systems, including like Central Arkansas Library System, the Fayetteville Public Library, and the Eureka Springs Public Library. These are really big libraries in the state of Arkansas. They had filed a lawsuit against the state because lawmakers had passed a bill trying to prevent certain books from getting in the hands of children. They passed a law that would have kept harmful content out of the hands of kids, but they never really defined what harmful meant. So it's basically if there's a book that had a gay character or a character who's young but experimenting and coming of age and learning about sex and things like that, those are the books they wanted to keep out of kids' hands. And this library system said that is illegal. That is a violation of our First Amendment rights. And they wanted to sue over that. So what did Jason Rapert do as soon as he got on the library board? He said, let's not give those 3 libraries any more money. Seriously, that was his argument. And this is what one of the other board members said at the time. Board member Pam Meredith said she opposed Rapert's motion. If we did withhold funds, that would not only hurt the library as a building or as an agency, but it would hurt the entire community, she said. Additionally, we would be taking a political stand, and I don't believe that's our cause here. And like, yeah, she's totally right, but also, oh no, you can't say that in Arkansas and expect to keep your job. You know what I mean? So thankfully, Rapert tried proposing, let's hurt these libraries that are trying to get kids to read books, that allow kids to read what they want. And the rest of the library board's like, no, we are not going to punish libraries for doing the thing that libraries are supposed to do. So that board eventually approved giving the state funds to all the eligible libraries. And that included over $200,000 to those 3 systems altogether. So that's great. But also Jason Rapert's still on the library board, and that's disturbing, right? And it got to the point that every time they had a meeting, he got angrier and angrier every single time because no one was letting him do what he wanted. Like, he wanted to ban these books. Check this out. This is another thing I wanted to point out from one of the meetings. Rapert wanted to know if Arkansas libraries contain certain books that some have found objectionable, such as genderqueer. Not surprisingly, Rapert chose to focus on books with LGBTQ plus themes and not those with extreme violence or steamy heterosexual sex scenes. Like, he just wants the gay books off the shelves. That's what this guy does. The funniest thing is he's so mad that all these people who actually know how libraries operate and want to protect the libraries, he's so mad they won't let him ban the books he wants to ban that he whined about it. And check out what he said. What do you think he's going to complain about? What do you think? This is according to Right Wing Watch. I can't believe I'm having to even sit here and talk to you about this. So I was asked to serve on the Arkansas State Library Board. And you know what? The very first meeting that I served on there, I'm the only white male on the board. And I believe they've created a hostile work environment for a Christian white male on the board because they absolutely cannot stand that I am standing up to say we need to do something about these nasty books. And let us all take a second and just say a prayer for the plight of white Christian men who have it harder than anyone else in the country at all times. Like, no one is more persecuted than white Christian men. That is the argument Rapert was making because no one liked his dumb ideas. And he's like, you're just mad at me because I'm a white man who believes in Christ. By the way, this is Arkansas. Even if the other members of that board were not white men, they were almost certainly Christian. But he's like, you don't like me because of my beliefs. And they're like, no, we don't like you because your ideas suck. And he's like, why are you persecuting me? I'm going to go to my friends at SALT. So anyway, this is a group, again, they meet like 4 times a year. They only have a few meetings and he's pissing everybody off. And here's the other thing I need you to know about this board. Look at the current board, the State Library Board. Here we go. These are the members of the Arkansas State Library Board. And what you can see, look at this column right over here. Look at when their terms expire. There's one a year. There's Jason Rapert at 2029. He has a 7-year term from when he was appointed. But basically, they replace one person a year. And the thing is, if you're a conservative, you have to treat this like the Supreme Court. Let's assume conservatives are in power forever, which is true. And if you're a conservative and you're like, I really want a right-wing Supreme Court, but I feel like it's too liberal, all you really have to do at this point is wait, because the liberal justices will eventually retire or die, and they will be replaced by a Republican fetus, because that's all they care about at this point. You know what I mean? So if you're Jason Rapert and you're like, no one here likes me, just wait. Eventually, the Republicans are going to replace the members of the board with other white Christian male Republicans, and you'll be able to do whatever you want. But it's not happening fast enough for this dude. So then, the last time they had a meeting, it got even crazier. So this year, they met in March, last month. And get this, Jason Rapert's like, hey guys, hey friends, I have 2 ideas for us to vote on. Idea number 1, let's disassociate from the American Library Association, those bunches of communists. Let's have nothing to do with them. So he literally wanted to sever ties between the state library system and the American Library Association because he really thinks that organization, which sponsors things, I believe they sponsor Banned Books Week, things like that. He's like, they're too woke. Let's not do anything with them. And the other thing he wanted to do is he said, let's just make sure kids never get their hands on sexually explicit material, which again goes to book bans, because what counts as sexually explicit? If there's a young adult novel about someone who has a crush on somebody else and maybe they experiment with them, which is, I don't know how to tell you this, that is a thing that actually happens in real life. He's like, let's make sure kids never read those books. And the good news is that the library board said, dude, we still don't like you. We're voting this down. But check out the vote. This time around, they rejected his motions 4-3. So it's like, I'm glad you rejected his motions, but yikes, 4-3 is not 6-1. That's getting really close for comfort. So again, all you got to do is wait a little bit, and conservatives are going to take over this board. But again, it's not happening immediately. So Jason Rapert goes on Facebook and check out what he did. This is from last November. He was mad about this back in November. So he writes this on Facebook. Open letter to the Arkansas State Legislature. Please protect our children from sexually explicit materials. And when he says open letter to the Arkansas State Legislature, he's not like a random dude writing an open letter. he is a former colleague of these people saying, hey guys, remember me? I used to be one of you. Let me give you some ideas. And look what he says later on in this post. Let me see. Here we go. After spending 1 year on this library board, I am of the opinion that the state of Arkansas would be better served if the Arkansas legislature would abolish the board completely and turn over all responsibility and authority for distributing the library funding to the Secretary of Education, who's a Republican, and the Department of Education, now run by Donald Trump. And so he explains each member is appointed for a 7-year term. It'll take years for Sarah Huckabee Sanders to replace enough members on this board to make a difference. The children of Arkansas need the legislature to take a stand. And so at the very bottom, I implore the members of the Arkansas legislature to take action to abolish this board and let the Republicans run it, or at a minimum, abolish the board and start over. We did it with other groups when I served in the legislature because we didn't like facts and liberals coming in our way. And then look at that last line. I didn't even highlight it, but please advise if I can be of assistance in any way. So this is what this dude is telling his buddies to do, even though he's no longer in power. And here's the sad thing. His little gambit there totally paid off, because this Tuesday, just a couple days ago, the Republicans in Arkansas passed a bill, and I want to show you, here we go, a bill. It's Senate Bill 640, and just look at letters A and B, because these are the important bits. A, the terms of the members of the State Library Board serving on the effective date of this act, whenever it's signed into law, shall be cut short and terminated. Everyone's going to be fired who's on the State Library Board. That's part A. What's part B? In place of those members we just fired, the governor shall appoint 7 brand new members of the State Library Board. So let's fire everybody, and let's have Sarah Huckabee Sanders appoint all 7 of their replacements right now. That's what this bill did, and the Arkansas Republicans passed it. And that's it. Like, they got this done. And the Democrats in Arkansas in elected office, they did not have the numbers to stop it, but they did try speaking out against it. This is from UALR Public Radio. Speaking on the House floor, Representative Andrew Collins, a Democrat, said the bill shows that lawmakers will allow our boards to be bullied and then dismissed. To fire a board because it doesn't bow to the whims of one of us is just not the way this process is supposed to work. They genuinely were doing their jobs in the way they thought was best, and that's what we should expect of any board. And he's totally right. That is what you do. You appoint experts to the board, and then you follow their recommendations. And unfortunately, again, Democrats did not have the numbers to stop this. This bill, let me tell you this. Usually it takes months for a bill to go from getting filed to getting heard in committee, to getting voted on, then transmitted to the other chamber, then they discuss it, then they vote on it. It takes months. This bill was introduced and passed in 1 week. That's the priority for the people in Arkansas. It passed in the Senate 28-4. It passed in the House 60-29. And it passed. So what did Jason Rapert say about this now that it's done? Well, this is what he posted earlier this week. Victory! The Arkansas State Library Board will be completely reconstituted with all new members after over 1 year of inaction by the liberal members of the board who refuse to protect minor children from sexually explicit materials. I want to clarify, there was no inaction. They just didn't want to ban books. And he's like, they're lazy. This is a victory, blah, blah, blah. I don't know why you hashtag Arkansas. That's a dude who doesn't understand social media. But then he says, my mission was accomplished. Because now he's going to get a brand new board that probably loves to ban books, and they're going to withhold funding from libraries if they don't ban the books, you got to take all those YA novels and all the books with like gay characters and put them in a secret section of the library that like you have to sneak around to get to. It's like Blockbuster back in the day. You had like a secret adult section that wasn't in the same room as all the other videos. That's what they want kids to treat. They want them to be shameful. They want them to feel ashamed of checking out these books that they should not have access to. Or maybe they'll come up with a law that says you need parents' permission. You need a permission slip to check out books that have what we deem inappropriate material, like lesbians in it or something like that. So this is what they're counting as a victory. Now, the board's going to be entirely gone. That means Jason Rapert's going to be fired too, but there's no reason Sarah Huckabee Sanders isn't just going to say, I'm going to include a brand new board and Jason Rapert's going right back on it. She'll just have like 7 hardcore Republicans who hate books and don't read anything. That's what they're going to try to do. Like, if Jason Rapert wants to prevent kids from reading books that include depictions of sexual assault and sex, and I know you're saying this in the comments, then he should start with the Bible. And he should go after every pastor in the state for encouraging kids to read the Bible. But of course, he's never going to do that because his religion always gets an exception. It's everyone else who has to suffer because Republicans like him are too immature to handle tough topics, and they want to make sure you and your kids are as dumb as they are. And you aren't allowed to experience what life is like through the eyes of a character who doesn't fit whatever mold they think everyone should be in. So again, this passed. It's now at Sarah Huckabee Sanders' desk. I assume she's going to sign it, and this library board is about to be reconstituted, which means Arkansas libraries are just a few months away, I assume, from having a lot of their funding being taken away from them. So more people in Arkansas are going to be emotionally stunted the same way these Republicans are. All right, I'm going to pause there for this story. What other questions we have here? It's crazy to me that they're going after sexually explicit books when kids have access to porn online, but I'm guessing they won't go after that because they are consumers. Yeah, it's a lot easier to go after public libraries and public schools because I mean, listen, if they could monitor your internet, they would totally do that too, but that's a lot harder. So they're going after places where people can educate themselves because the best thing Republicans can do is prevent people from getting a good education. What do you mean I can't control the decisions? I'm the only white guy here. I'm so persecuted. Is a perfect indication of, that's the wrong word. It's just, that's exactly what he sounds like all the time. I have made a video about this, by the way. If you look in the videos I have made on this channel, there's a video, search for Jason Rapert's name, because the last time I reached out to this guy, it was years ago. It's because I wanted to get a comment for a story I was writing about a stupid bill he wanted to pass. And instead of just giving me a copy-paste response, which is what I expected, he actually threatened me for even asking him about this stuff. And I tell that entire story in one of my older videos on this channel if you want to go look it up. Bet he's got dog-eared copies of every one of those books. That is funny, but I don't think he reads. If he read, he would be better off. If everyone read, they would be better off. But Republicans don't want you to just read certain books and not others, except for the Bible. They don't want you to read. Reading is how you get smart. Getting smart is how you stop voting for idiots like them. And so they do not want people to read. The complete irony is that these right-wing zealots truly believe they're the good guys in this. Yep, they don't see or even understand the bigotry or dissonance. They're convinced they are right. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I agree with you fully. He really does think he's protecting children by doing all of this stuff. And again, who do you want to ask? If you ask people who study this and are experts in child development, getting them to read books where they might be learning about this stuff at their own pace and their own way, that is healthy. Like the worst thing to do, just to give you one example, if you want to learn about sex education, comprehensive sex ed is the way to do it. The worst way to do it is by telling kids don't have it, just abstinence only forever, because at some point they're going to start making harmful decisions because it's going to happen regardless. And educating them ahead of time is what you need to do. It's like the hepatitis vaccine or something. It's like a lot of parents don't want their kids to get it because that might imply that they might have sex. It's like, yeah, get the safety, get the vaccine. They're like, no, my kid's just going to stay abstinent, so they don't need this. Just really bad parents, really bad policy. Why can't we agree sexually explicit content is not necessary in schools? Okay, if you want to play that game, I'm not for gratuitous sex scenes in books being assigned in school. First of all, that's not even what we're talking about. But the point is, what do these Republicans think is sexually explicit content? We're not talking about gratuitous sex scenes just for the sake of getting it in there. No, it's characters who are like, I'm having feelings for someone of the same sex, and I went on a date and we had a kiss. That to them counts as sexually explicit material. Like everything that involves LGBTQ kids or someone writing about a character who may be gay or trans or something like that, that counts as sexually explicit material. No one is advocating like, hey, public schools, they should all watch porn in the classroom. No one is saying that. What we're saying is a healthy way to read these books, learn about this stuff. Kids should be able to have access to it at a public library. And there's a separate conversation to be had about which books are worth kids' time to read in school under the moderation of a teacher and things like that. But again, we are not having a discussion about like gratuitous sex scenes in books that are assigned to kids and they have to read it no matter what. That's a straw man. No one's making that argument. We're talking about, well, if a kid wants to check out a book at the library, like, I don't know, Twilight, I haven't read that one, but I think there are sex scenes or sex-ish scenes in there. Should kids be allowed to check out that book? Yeah, if they want to. Should we assign certain books with sex scenes in public schools? Again, what's the context? That is what I'm curious about. If it's tastefully done or it serves a plot purpose, we can have a discussion about, well, why do English teachers think this is worth teaching? That's a great conversation to have. That's not the one they are having here. Things pass quickly when it's intended to own the libs. Yeah, I mean, this passed in a week. Bills, oh, by the way, one of the things, I forgot if I have this here. Maybe it's in a different story. It is wild to me that they will pass this quickly, but anything that's actually going to help with funding, they'll take their sweet time. Like, let's help public school teachers. No, let's just sit on that bill. We don't need to worry about that one. That's the priorities of Arkansas Republicans. All right, I'm going to jump to the next story here. Let me close out. Oh, it feels good to X out Jason Raper. Okay. Okay, this is a fascinating story about a bill that just got passed in Tennessee. Tennessee Republicans have just passed a law forcing high school health teachers to tell students that there is a right order for things they need to do if they want to live a successful life. There's a 4-step checklist that kids have to follow if they want the best chance for success later in life. Seriously. And it's called the Success Sequence Act. And this is the headline from a Chattanooga Times Free Press. Success Sequence Bill passes Tennessee House. It now heads to the governor's desk for the signature. So what is the success sequence? If you had to come up with a list of 4 things you got to do to be successful in life, what do you think they would be? Because again, Republicans in Tennessee have just approved a 4-step checklist that kids have to be taught in school for how to be successful. And whatever you are thinking you got to do, it's not this list. Okay, let me show you what the list is. Here is the bill. This is the Success Sequence Act. There we go. Let's look at what's on this list. Success sequence means a method by which a person completes the following in the following sequence. Letter A, you got to obtain a high school diploma or a high school equivalency credential. So graduate high school or get your GED. You got to do that. That is part 1. Part 2, you got to enter the workforce or go to college. You have to. After high school. Okay. Number 3, enter into marriage. And number 4, have children. And really, it's C and D that are the real issues here. Because, like, yeah, it's good if you graduate high school. And if you can't for whatever reason, good for you for getting your GED later on. That is a good thing. And yes, you should go to college. But if you want to go to a trade school, that's fine. If you want to start directly into work or you go into the military or something, I get that too. Those are fine. That doesn't mean you're guaranteed success. But yeah, if you do those things, you're probably setting yourself up to be better off in the long run. But then enter into marriage, then have children is just funny to me because the government's telling you this is what you need to do. And if you don't do this in this order, we're out to get you. Like, you're screwed is what they are saying. Like, the implication is that if you don't do one of these things or you do them out of order, it's some kind of problem. And in case you're wondering, is this some sort of Project 2025 thing? The answer is hell yes. This is actually a bill that was drafted by the Heritage Foundation, which is the group behind Project 2025, and it was sponsored in Tennessee. One of the sponsors was State Senator Janice Bowling, who is one of the people who spread the right-wing conspiracy theory that falsely claimed kids were dressing up as furries and using litter boxes in classrooms. Like, just the dumbest Republicans in a party full of really bad people. And again, I know I've said this before, but like, there is a reason some classrooms have litter boxes. And it's not because kids want to use them because they think they are cats or dogs. It's because in the case of a school shooting, if you can't leave the classroom to go to the bathroom, it might be useful to have a litter box in the classroom so that you're not stinking up the whole place. It's the saddest reason to have a litter box in there. But the right-wing Republicans have spread this lie about it, and those are the people sponsoring this bill. So why are they pushing this bill? Here's what Janice Bowling, the furry lady, said. Some children are not privileged to recognize that or live within that. Some kids don't understand that you're supposed to graduate and then get a job and then get married and then have kids. And so in these classes, these children will be given this key to success. Republican proponents argued the so-called success sequence could help lift people out of poverty. Which, again, part of me wants to laugh at that because if any of you have kids, that's the fastest way to lose your money outside of gambling. Like, if you want money, don't have kids. What are you doing? But okay, let me give you the best case scenario here. Okay, if you graduate high school and college, or you have a steady, stable job, good for you. If then you decide, you know what? I'm comfortable. I know what I'm doing with my life. Now I'm ready to get married. Okay. And then you're like, you know what? My partner and I are doing really well. We're both healthy. We're ready to have kids, and you want to do that? Fine. There's nothing wrong with that path. But implying that this is the one thing these are the 4 things you got to do if you want to be successful is just ridiculous, because none of those things are a key to success. They are ingredients that might help. But obviously, plenty of people skip items on that list, or they reorder the steps in their own life for their own reasons, and they do just fine. And there are plenty of people that do all 4 of those things in that order, and they are miserable. Like, that's why this list is stupid. It's not that going to college and getting married and having kids is bad. It's that not doing those things is not bad either if you don't want to. Like, what they are ignoring here is, what are the root causes that lead to a better chance for success in life, right? That's what you want kids to have. Give them a good foundation so that they can go off and do whatever they want to. And they're ignoring that. For example, what happens if you graduate high school, get an apprenticeship, maybe with a relative, and then you marry your high school girlfriend, and then you impregnate her when you are 19. That is a thing that does happen. And they followed the formula perfectly. But those people may not have a lot of life experience. They barely know each other. They barely know themselves. They probably don't have a lot of money saved up in case of emergency. Maybe the jobs that they are training for, or at least the guy is not the job he's going to want or be able to have down the road. I don't think that's setting him up for success. Meanwhile, if there's a woman who decides I'm going to stay single, I'm going to focus on my career, I'm going to spend my 20s and 30s dating around and sleeping around, and I'm going to travel and I'm going to save my money. And then, hey, I met someone I want to marry. And by the way, that guy has a child from a previous relationship, but I love that child and we're going to form a family together. I would argue that person is way more positioned to have a successful future because some of the biggest concerns that people have, money and health and self-awareness, have been satisfied. So there are exceptions to this rule in every direction. That's the point. A lot of this depends on how much support do you have from your extended family? What's the job market like? What hopes and dreams do you have for the future? But that's the point here. There isn't a pathway to success, but this bill suggests that there are, and it lays it out in numerical order as if this is a checklist you just need to run through. And along the way, they ignore all the reasons someone may or may not actually be successful. One of the things it says in this bill, and let me go back to this bill, because if you look at the whereas clauses leading up to why this bill is so important, check out what they say right at the top here. This is the beginning of Senate Bill 471. Whereas couples who have children within marriage have higher family incomes and lower poverty rates than their unmarried counterparts. And let's just stop there for a second. I'm sorry, I'm going to go to the next one here. Where's the other one I wanted to show you? Look at this one. Whereas children raised in stable, married parent families are more likely to excel in school and generally earn higher GPAs than children who are not. All of that ignores how people with stability in their lives have the luxury of getting married when they're emotionally ready for it. And they can have kids when they're prepared to take care of those kids. And they have the resources to give their kids an environment where they can actually focus on school rather than having to come home after school and go to work somewhere all day. If you have the resources to do these things, yeah, your kids are going to be better off. And I know a bunch of you are thinking this is the correlation does not lead to causation. Correlation does not imply causation. Yeah, none of these Republicans took that message. They never learned it. This is another one. Look at this whereas clause over here. Whereas children not raised in a home with married parents are twice as likely to end up in jail or prison before reaching 30 years of age. Okay, let's assume that's true. That doesn't mean the solution is shove two people together and say, well, you better get married for the sake of the kids. That's not how you solve that. Having the stability matters. Living in a home where married parents, think about this. If you're living in a home where there are married parents, but all they do is argue all the time, or both parents have to work multiple jobs to make ends meet, that is way harder for kids than living in a home with a single parent who is available for them in the evenings. Now, here's the thing. In Arkansas, instead of creating conditions for all children to have the best chance of success, however they define it later in life, these idiots are passing a checklist for kids to follow. And then they're patting themselves on their back for doing the bare minimum while ignoring everything that might interfere with someone's path to success, right? If you're not successful, they're basically saying it's because you didn't listen to us and you didn't follow those rules, not because they failed to create an environment where everyone else could thrive. It's always your fault. It's never the Republicans' fault, right? They don't want people knowing that the simplest path to guaranteed financial success in life, for example, is to be born into a wealthy family. That one's going to help. Elon didn't get there on his own. His daddy owned an emerald mine. You know what I mean? You know what would actually help everyone in Arkansas be more successful or have the best chance of success later in life? Having access to free healthcare. having free childcare available to parents, having access to birth control so you don't have unwanted pregnancies, having a guaranteed income. But Republicans don't want to do any of that stuff because they don't give a shit about your success. They pass this bill because it makes them feel better, not because it's going to help your life. And in fact, you know what else is interesting about this bill? You know what else they did during this session? They had a chance to sponsor universal pre-K, and they said, hell no. Why would we want to do that? That might actually help families. We're not interested in doing that. So they shot down the universal pre-K bill, but they passed this stupid checklist. I do want to give a shout out to, again, Tennessee is one of those states where there's only like 4 Democrats in the state legislature, but one of them is a state representative named Afton Bain. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. She actually tried to amend the bill to get rid of all those whereas clauses at the beginning, which said like, you know, all the data shows that kids with married parents do better in life. I want to show you what she proposed to change this bill to, okay? And it's just all the whereas clauses. She wasn't even changing the success sequence. It was the preamble she wanted to change. And just look at how glorious this is. This is from Afton Bain. And look at this. Let's delete what they gave you and substitute this instead. Whereas millennial women have come of age in an era marked by wage stagnation, skyrocketing student debt, unaffordable housing, and the rising costs of childcare and healthcare, all of which make marriage and family formation increasingly out of reach. True. Whereas over the past 45 years, the decline in children living with married parents reflects not a rejection of family values, but the growing economic instability that delays or deters marriage and childbearing. Yeah. Whereas nearly a quarter of children today are raised outside of marriage, a statistic driven less by personal choice and more by structural barriers that make partnership and parenting financially precarious. Whereas while children raised in stable, well-supported families tend to thrive, yeah, our focus must be on creating conditions where all families, regardless of marital status, have access to opportunity, security, and community support. I want to keep reading because I love this. Whereas millennial women understand that marriage alone does not guarantee economic stability, especially in a landscape of wage inequality, rising medical costs, and inadequate family leave policies. Whereas millennial women face a workforce that often punishes caregiving and undervalues women's labor, making the prospect of balancing work, marriage, and parenting an overwhelming challenge. There's just a little more here. Whereas millennials carry more student loan debt than any previous generation, delaying milestones like home ownership, marriage, and childbearing well into their 30s and beyond. Whereas the high cost of childcare, lack of affordable health care, and insufficient parental support policies have led many women today to delay or forego having children. Despite narratives that tie personal success to marriage and childbearing, millennial women are redefining what it means to flourish, prioritizing financial independence, community connection, and personal fulfillment. And finally, whereas building a society where family formation is a real choice, not an economic gamble, requires addressing the root causes of inequality, investing in paid leave, childcare, healthcare, and housing, and creating fair economic conditions for all. Now, here's the stupid 4-rule checklist that Republicans want to pass. That is a wonderful amendment to this bill. And guess what happened after she suggested it? Republicans shot it down 72-22. They're like, shut up telling us these facts. We have the solution. It's a 4-step checklist. But again, what does that show you? It shows you Republicans don't want to fix the problem. They want to redefine the problem and then act like they have the solutions for them. I think the only thing that surprised me about their success sequence is that they never said you have to go to church. If you asked me what I thought the 4 Republican rules would be for success, I would have guessed going to church, and a Christian one, not one of those brown ones, would have totally been on the list. But somehow that one didn't make the cut. Maybe because they didn't want to deal with any church-state separation pushback on this thing. Anyway, I would also say it should not be lost on anyone that the president of the United States and the head of the Republican Party, for lack of better terms, is someone who allegedly paid someone to take his SATs in high school, who is currently on his third marriage, who ignored his children when they were younger. So, like, I don't know, is he a success? Is that the role model you want? And the shadow president, Elon Musk, has at least 14 kids with 4 different women, and he doesn't have relationships with damn near any of them. And there was a Wall Street Journal article this week about how he uses Twitter as a personal dating app so he can just impregnate women whose profiles he follows. Is that who Republicans want kids to be like? Are they successful the way Republicans think success ought to be defined? It is deeply ironic that for all the talk from conservatives about how we can't teach comprehensive American history that emphasizes slavery because it might make white kids feel bad, they have no problem telling children of single parents, for example, that they're probably screwed. So the Associated Press says that bills like this have been proposed in states like Texas, Kentucky, and Ohio, and a bill just like this has been signed into law in Utah. So that's what they're up to in Tennessee. What questions you got here? Enters into marriage. Funny, they didn't specify it has to be a straight marriage. Again, I think they wanted to avoid a lawsuit, so they didn't specify anything that might set it up for failure. So they tried to make it super broad. Like, it's just stupid, but it's not illegally stupid. Equal parts Christian nationalism and capitalist indoctrination. Yeah, apparently the only way you can be successful is if you have a lot of money. There's no possible way you can be poor and happy. Are you kidding me? No, that's not what Jesus wanted. So they're going to promote comprehensive sex ed to discourage teenage pregnancy, right? Right? Of course not. No, that would help kids make responsible decisions, and they're not interested in actually helping people. So nope, that one's not on the agenda. Emotional intelligence is so important in relationships. From what I've seen, it's difficult to come by those in super religious conservative circles. Yeah, anecdotally, I agree with you. I mean, I don't know. I can speak for myself. I don't think I knew myself for well into my 20s and then some. And even now, I mean, look, I probably think whatever I did last week was stupid. But again, having some self-awareness and understanding what the rest of the world is like, I think that does go a long way to helping you understand your place in it, the sort of person you want to spend your life with, what you want to do with your life. You can't do that without having certain experiences and even being in relationships and things like that. It's really hard to come by that sort of emotional intelligence. And so if you're just telling kids you're better off getting married than trying to figure out what you're looking for in a partner, which is going to take some time, that's just bad advice. That's not advice I would give to anyone, but I'm also not a Republican who just wants to check off some box and pretend like I'm helping people. Funny how some European countries don't necessarily participate in marriage, and yet Europeans do pretty well. The quality of life markers are always higher than the US. No kidding. I mean, if you ask any other country that seems to have a lot of happy people in it, what's the key to happiness? They're not going to give you that list of 4 things. Like, no country wants the American healthcare system. No country wants the way we underfund our public education system. We have a great education system, but not the way we're funding it right now. And the higher education system, which is one of the best in the world, what are Republicans doing to it? They're trying to dismantle it as we speak by taking away their funding. Over 50% of marriage ends in divorce, and 100% of divorces begin with a marriage. Therefore, by their own logic, marriage is the leading cause of divorce. Maybe we should ban marriage. I mean, if you want to prevent divorces, that is definitely a thing you could do. But again, this idea that the only way to be, I mean, this is an argument I remember hearing back in the day, because I'm old, about when marriage equality was some fight that a lot of people didn't understand. And you had to fight to get people to say, yeah, it's okay for gay people to get married. And one of the questions from some gay activists and critics was like, why is this the pinnacle? Because having civil rights and having equal rights is worth fighting for. marriage is not necessarily like the top of the food chain there. So there's a lot of emphasis. They're not saying gay marriage is wrong, same-sex marriage is wrong. They were saying, wow, that's a weird thing to be the focus of everything we're working for, even though it's a good thing. But this is the point. Like, marriage in itself doesn't mean you're going to be better off. Ask anyone who has parents who just, all you remember, your memories of your parents are of them fighting all the time. That's not a good thing necessarily. Like, having married parents who don't like each other is not better for you than having divorced parents who are living their own lives and very happy separately. You know what I mean? They always leave out competent, humane, kind, caring, not abusive when they say kids need parents in the home. No kidding, right? Having parents who actually want you there and want to play with you and spend time with you and don't hurt you, like, that's what you actually want. Having like a marriage certificate, which is the only thing they're caring about in this story, that is not this, like, that's not a hallmark of a successful marriage. That's easy to get. They have a point about kids from broken homes. I came from a broken home, and here I am hanging out online with a bunch of heathens. I mean, buddy, you failed. You're watching me. What are you doing with your life? All right, I'm jumping to a different story. I just had a couple more that I wanted to get to before we finish tonight. Okay. I want to show you, before I get to the actual story, I want to show you a clip that went viral, I think about last week, and it went viral on TikTok especially. But basically, it is a pastor named Josh Blevins of Grace Calvary Chapel in St. Joseph, Missouri. And this is a sermon he gave last week where he told his congregation what he thought about a school board candidate or two.
And we have some people running that need to be in, and others who, quite frankly, have agendas of their own that are apart from the truth of God and in the darkness. And so we want to pray for and encourage our sister, Kim Miller, who is running, she goes to church here, and encourage you. And I already know some people are like, well, Josh, you know, the IRS says you can't tell us who to vote for. Listen, the government should have no type of leash that is strong enough to hinder the church from doing what is right. That's period. And so we want to encourage you to vote for Kim Miller. I will be voting as well for Jennifer Kearns, just because there are 2 seats open, and those are the 2 candidates I believe will uphold the strongest and focus on the strongest things that need to be focused on the school board, and hopefully be a bulwark of protection against some of the ideologies that are coming into our students' education.
So the reason I play that for you, he mentioned Kim Miller and Jennifer Kearns. Well, guess what? In their community, those 2 went on to win their elections. This is just like a week ago. They won their elections, and part of why they won their elections is because they had this megachurch pastor telling everyone to vote for them. Now, that is a violation of something called the Johnson Amendment. I've talked about this. I talked about it last week. The Johnson Amendment says nonprofit organizations cannot tell you how to vote from the pulpit or from their organizations. Planned Parenthood, as supportive of abortion rights as they are, cannot say, go vote for the Democrat because that's the abortion protection candidate. That's the pro-choice candidate. They can't do that. They can say, hey, if you're curious about who to vote for, here's our scorecard, and the following members got A's, but they cannot send you anything that says, go vote for this person. And that's the same rule that applies to churches. They cannot tell you how to vote. And that's exactly what that guy just did. He violated the Johnson Amendment when he told people how to vote. And in a system that worked, the IRS would, if they learned about that, the IRS could say, okay, you're no longer a nonprofit organization. People cannot write off their donations to you on their taxes. It's going to be harder for you to raise funds because you're a political group now. You are not just a nonprofit doing whatever it is you do. And the thing I posted last week when I did a story about this is that even though we have so many examples of pastors doing exactly that, it seems like the IRS never investigates it and they never take action against those churches. Now, last week I did a story where we found out the IRS did send a warning letter to a church that did exactly what this pastor just did. But for whatever reason, they decided to shut down that investigation as soon as Trump came into office. But again, just goes to show you, this is what pastors do at a lot of churches, especially conservative Christian ones. They tell you how to vote. And that guy even said in his little speech, I already know some people are like, well, Josh, the IRS says you can't tell us who to vote for. And then what did he say in response to that? Well, listen, the government should have no type of leash strong enough to hinder the church from doing what's right. So he doesn't care what the IRS says. He knows the rules and he's going to break them anyway because he knows damn well the IRS is not going to come after him because that's what always happens. Now, the reason I bring this up is that recently Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma introduced a bill, and I want to show you this bill. This is something he just introduced. What's this called? Short title. This is the Free Speech Fairness Act. This is what he introduced. And this is a lot of legalese, but I just want to show you this bit right here. And it says, what is this bill actually going to do? An organization shall not fail to be treated as organized and operated as a nonprofit. He says, if you're a nonprofit, we are not going to take away your nonprofit status if you have participated or intervened in any political campaign on behalf of or against any candidate, as long as you do two things. We're not going to take away your nonprofit status as long as two things happen. Number one, as long as you do it in the ordinary course of the organization's regular and customary activities. What does that mean? That means if you endorse a candidate while giving a sermon, which is the thing you do every week anyway, we shouldn't hold it against you. That's part one. And part two says, as long as it results in the organization incurring not more than de minimis incremental expenses, which is a fancy way of saying, as long as you're not spending money to endorse the candidate, we don't care. So what that pastor I showed you, what he just did under this bill, he did it during a sermon. It didn't cost him any money to do it. James Lankford is saying, then we shouldn't even worry about that guy losing his tax-exempt status. That pastor should never have to worry about it. This is the bill that Lankford has just introduced. It would destroy the Johnson Amendment once and for all. It would allow pastors to endorse candidates every week, right? And that's what he wants to do. And the thing to point out is that conservatives love treating the IRS as a boogeyman, as people who are coming after their churches, trying to attack them, trying to take away their tax-exempt statuses. And Donald Trump played off of this for a long time when he was campaigning. He said, I'm going to undo the Johnson Amendment. He said, I filed an executive order, so the Johnson Amendment is no longer in effect, which was a lie, because that's not how you get rid of it. You need an act of Congress to undo the Johnson Amendment. And James Lankford knows Trump is lying about that, which is why he introduced a bill to get rid of the Johnson Amendment. But the thing is, no matter how many conservative pastors have endorsed candidates from the pulpit, the IRS has not gone after them. In over 70 years since the Johnson Amendment went into effect, maybe 2 ministries have been punished by the IRS, and one of them lost it because they paid for a full-page ad in a newspaper telling people how to vote. Like, it was that egregious. And that's kind of it. So one of the reasons I wanted to point this out is Lankford's bill, which he wants to use to destroy the Johnson Amendment. He went on a talk show hosted by a Christian hate group leader named Tony Perkins to talk about this bill. And I want to play this first clip for you because Lankford openly admits you don't need this bill because everybody knows the IRS doesn't actually do shit when it comes to revoking the nonprofit status from any of these churches.
Well, let's go to something else you and I passionately care about, and that is the ability of pastors to preach the Word of God as it applies to the issues of our day, including politics. You care about that as one who's been in the ministry, and so you have introduced the Free Speech Fairness Act. Talk about that.
Yeah, pastors should be able to preach the Word of God. They should not have to worry about an IRS agent sitting in their congregation monitoring their speech to make sure they don't mention something in politics in their sermon. That's absurd. But we're the United States of America. Pastors have First Amendment rights, just like every single American has First Amendment rights. Why we even discuss this at all is because decades ago, something was added into the IRS rules called the Johnson Amendment that says if a church endorses some political candidate, and again, that's up to the interpretation of the IRS agent, what that actually means, then they could actually have IRS take away their nonprofit status. So churches often live in fear of something that has literally never happened to any church, but they just live in fear of that.
Right.
So it restrains their speech. So all I'm trying to do is be able to clarify and say, pastors have the same free speech rights as everyone else. Now, I don't believe pastors should preach politics all the time. I think they should talk about Jesus and salvation and the goodness and grace of God all the time. I think that should be their obsession to be able to talk about. But when things like abortion come up or marriage comes up or so many other things, or when there's an election coming and they encourage people to go vote or say there's an obvious candidate here that shares our values, they shouldn't be restrained from that either. And so this gives the opportunity for people to just freely speak as every other American.
So a few things about that interview right there, because Langford was just making shit up the entire time. One of the things he said is that pastors should not have to worry about an IRS agent sitting in their congregation monitoring their speech, which is a thing that has happened a total of 0 times ever. Not only does the IRS not sit in church and listen and like be on the lookout for what you're saying, the history of pastors endorsing candidates in the church, you could look this up. It's called Pulpit Freedom Sunday. There were pastors who literally endorsed candidates from the pulpit and videotaped it and sent those videos to the IRS because they want to bait the IRS into coming after them so they could file a lawsuit, get it up to the Supreme Court, so that the Supreme Court says it's fine, pastors can say whatever they want, no punishment ever when it comes to your nonprofit status. So this idea that IRS agents are sitting in your congregation, not only are they not doing that, pastors openly bait the IRS to come after them. So like, don't tell me IRS agents are like monitoring you. No, they have nothing to do with this. If anything, they're not paying any attention to what's going on in the pulpit. The other thing Langford said, he admitted the churches often live in fear of something that has literally never happened to any church. Well, then maybe those pastors are dumb. Like, why are they fearing something that has literally never happened? Maybe because it's literally never going to happen. So then don't be afraid of it. No, none of these pastors are afraid of the IRS. They love being able to say, the IRS might come after me, but this is the right thing to do, so I'm going to do it anyway. It reminds me of all those horrible conservative comedians. They all have like Netflix specials with duct tape over their mouths for the thumbnail. And they're like, hey, people don't want me to say this. I'm being silenced, but I'm not going to let them shut me up because I got something to say, probably about trans people. And again, they're saying this on their Netflix special that they got paid a ton of money to make. Like, just the audacity of pretending like you're being silenced when we have so much evidence that you are never silenced about any of this stuff. And even Langford admits it's literally never happened that the IRS has come after them. And then finally, he says this thing like, pastors should be able to say whatever they want. So when things like abortion come up, or marriage comes up, or so many other things, or when there's an election coming and they want to encourage people to go vote, or say there's an obvious candidate that shares our values, they shouldn't be restrained from that. And what's interesting is how he tries to conflate all 4 of those things. No one has ever said a church cannot talk about abortion. No one has ever said a church cannot talk about marriage. They might be bigots, they might be wrong about all that stuff, but no one's ever said, hey, IRS, this church said same-sex marriage is unbiblical, you should go after them. That has never happened, and it never should happen. And then he says, oh, well, some churches want to encourage people to go vote. That's fine. Even conservative churches can say, hey, everyone, there's an election coming up. You should go vote. Hell, you can even have them fill out voter registration cards in the lobby. Some black churches do that. They call it souls to the polls. We're all going to go vote together. That is all legal and fine. No one is saying the IRS should punish any of those churches for doing those things. The only thing they should not be able to do, according to the IRS, is say, this is how we want you to vote. And baby Jesus is watching over you, and he's going to cry if you don't vote the way I tell you to. You can't do that. That's the only rule. And Langford just says, yeah, people say, like pastors are worried about talking about abortion and marriage and telling people who to vote for. Like, no. You can do the first two things. But no, the last thing is different. One of those things is not like the other. He's just lying about all of this. It's unbelievable. Either he doesn't get it or he totally gets it and he's lying. And I'm not sure which of those is better. And then here's the last thing Langford says that I wanted to point out to you. He claims that liberal pastors tell their congregations to vote for Democrats all the time, which they don't. But he says they do it because they know the IRS isn't going to go after liberal churches. The IRS is only going to go after conservative ones.
Quite frankly, churches that are more left-leaning, they talk about politics all the time. They endorse candidates all the time and don't live in fear of the IRS because there's a belief that they have they're not going to come after us. We're on the left. It's only going to come after churches on the right on that. We need to be able to make sure this is very clear. The IRS doesn't have the authority to go monitor the speech of pastors and of church leaders. Let's have them do tax collection. That's what their job is, not monitoring free speech.
That one is even a bigger lie than the other one. First of all, left-leaning churches do not endorse candidates all the time. I wish they friggin' would at this point, but they don't. And guess what? If they did, I am all for the IRS revoking their tax-exempt status too. By the way, there were a couple of black churches in the South that told people to vote for Kamala Harris in the last presidential election. I think they should lose their 501c3 status as well. But the point is, no, this doesn't really happen on the left. They really don't make a habit of doing this. If you actually enforce the Johnson Amendment, it's conservative Christian churches that would be impacted the most. But the other thing, this idea that, the reason liberal pastors do endorse candidates is because they know the IRS is only going to go after conservative churches. No, that has never happened. Not a single pastor in America who is liberal has said, you know what? The IRS always goes after right-wing churches, but they're never going to come after me. They're never going to come after me. They've never thought that ever. Because the point is, we all know the IRS doesn't go after anybody. And also, this idea that, what did Langford say at the end? The IRS doesn't have the authority to go monitor the speech of pastors. They do have the authority to enforce their own rules because they're the ones that give you a nonprofit status. But then he says, let's have the IRS do tax collection. That's what their job is, not monitoring free speech. Well, guess what? That's bullshit. You know how I know that? Because Republicans don't want the IRS collecting taxes either. That's why they want to abolish the IRS and get rid of all their agents. So what is Langford doing? He's lying about everything because that's what Republicans do. Like, the fact is, if the Johnson Amendment were enforced, that's not even monitoring free speech. It's just making sure that groups that get a government benefit that they asked for are playing by the rules they signed up to follow and that they benefit from. And I mean, if they want to be a political group more than a religious one, they are free to give up their tax exemptions, but they can't have it both ways. And it is amazing to me that Tony Perkins, the hate group leader guy who was interviewing Langford, he didn't bring up any of this. And I don't know if that means he's also equally ignorant or he's just a really bad interviewer. It could be all of the above. But again, I don't think this bill will pass because I don't think Republicans in Congress actually want to pass anything meaningful. They're not going to waste their time trying to get this one through. But even if it does, it'll only stop the IRS from doing something it doesn't even do to begin with. It's not like they're going to start enforcing their rule anytime soon. Just a ridiculous thing. Okay, I'm done with that story. What other questions we have here? I'm not even sure why they care about getting rid of the Johnson Amendment. They violate it with impunity. Yeah, I mean, again, it's even if it's in effect right now, and it technically is, nothing happens. I've done 2 weeks of stories about how the IRS doesn't do anything about obvious breaking of their rules. So what are they worried about? Honestly, at this point, I think if the IRS is not going to go after churches for any of this, I think every left-leaning church in America has a ethical obligation to tell their congregations to vote for Democrats. They should, because it's the right thing to do at this point. Find the most progressive candidate and get Republicans out of office. You could make that an ethical argument, but also, why are we giving up unilateral disarmament here? Like, it makes no sense to say we're going to play by the rules even if Republicans are not going to do it. Then Democrats should stop playing by the rules. It's the same way I feel about gerrymandering. I live in Illinois, which is gerrymandered to benefit Democrats. And there are Republicans in my state all the time that are like, we need to get rid of gerrymandering. It's like, okay, let's do it on a national level and get rid of it everywhere. And then they're like, no, that's not what I meant. I just meant in this blue state and nowhere else. I thought the IRS was about collection of taxes on property and wages. Why are they concerned with it unless they are getting huge amounts of money? Because it's about playing by the rules. Everyone needs to pay their taxes, with the exception of nonprofits, which in theory provide a service to people. And we want them to get money because they're not about making a profit. They're about giving you a service. So I think it's good. I've heard this argument online. Let's tax churches. That's a dumb argument, because you can't just tax churches. What you would be doing is taxing all nonprofit groups. And I think that's bad. I want nonprofit groups to thrive. I want them to be successful. And that includes churches. But the IRS has an obligation to say, these are the rules you have to follow for this benefit of not paying your taxes. That's it. Everyone else, like, I don't care if you owe very little money, but also the IRS should go after people who owe lots of taxes. I think they should spend their time on people who don't pay their taxes. And it's telling that Republicans want to take away resources from the IRS so they can't investigate like the rich people who don't pay them. I want everyone to pay them equally and we should have a different discussion about what those tax rates should be. But it doesn't matter if a church would just owe a little bit of money. They just need to play by the same rules. I don't want a system where because you're Christian, you're allowed to avoid the rules and everyone else has to play by them. That's what I don't like here. I hate that they're pretending this is the First Amendment issue. It's an issue of being a nonprofit. Correct. Pastors can talk about whatever they want. They're not being muzzled because they can't endorse a candidate. They agreed that if you get a tax exemption, you don't endorse candidates. And now they're like, what? I have to play by that rule? That's not fair. No, you don't get to have it both ways. If you want to endorse a candidate, go do it, but then pay your taxes like all the other groups that endorse candidates. That's it. Pick a lane. What was that one case in Florida? Pastor said to vote for these 3 school board candidates and the IRS said that's A-okay. I'll help you out. That's every single case ever. Again, there are so many examples of pastors telling their congregations to vote for this candidate or that one or this slate of school board candidates. I played video last week of pastors saying, go vote for these 3 school board candidates. And again, the IRS just said recently, all right, we're shutting down the investigation, even though all we did is say, hey, maybe you should play by the rules. And the church's lawyers are like, no, we're not going to play by your stupid rules because we're Christian. And the IRS is like, all right, sorry, we asked. And they back down. All right, I got one more story for you before we get to some tweets. And this one might be relatively fast, but I thought this was important. This is the headline. Let me bring this up here. Yeah. I don't know if you work for the State Department or not, but apparently if you work for the State Department and you have witnessed anti-Christian bias, Secretary of State Marco Rubio and the whole Trump administration wants you to tattle on everybody. And this is the headline that was in Politico recently. State tells employees to report on one another for anti-Christian bias. It's very Handmaid's Tale-esque. So literally, the State Department is asking people to submit examples anonymously of anti-Christian bias. And they're going to punish anyone who has committed this. This is what the article said here. The department, according to a copy of an internal cable obtained by Politico, will work with an administration-wide task force to collect information involving anti-religious bias during the last presidential administration, and will collect examples of anti-Christian bias through anonymous employee report forms. So a couple things about this. They apparently do not care about religious bias now, because if you're not a Christian and you work for the government now, holy crap, you're screwed, but they don't care about that. They want examples of anti-religious bias during the last administration. Oh, and by the way, I know we said religious, but we really meant anti-Christian bias because that's the only version of this that they actually care about. And this task force is scheduled to meet next Tuesday to discuss all their complaints. So this idea that anti-Christian bias needs to be rooted out of the government, I mean, it's ridiculous for a bunch of reasons. For one thing, what counts as anti-Christian bias? Like what, someone putting up a rainbow flag on a building? Is that anti-Christian? What if someone wishes you happy holidays? Is that anti-Christian? I don't know. But this order presumes that Christians are victims of discrimination when everyone knows in reality they're usually the perpetrators, right? The attacks against trans people right now are almost exclusively coming from Christian zealots. It also treats Christians as a picked-on minority when they are so in the majority, right? Because Christians not only make up the majority of people in the country, they make up 87% of Congress. And if you remember this from the Pew Research Center, they make up 98.1% of Republicans in Congress. They're 98% of Republicans. And these Republicans are like, we got to stop this anti-Christian bias. It's too hard for Christians to get ahead in this government. Like, as I've said before, complaining that Christians have it rough is like saying the problem with racism in America is that it really hurts white people. So if Christians are the victims, I'm sure non-Christian groups would love to trade places with them, at least with regards to how much persecution they receive and how much political power they have. And also, this directive sends a message that while Christians cannot be discriminated against, apparently everyone else is fair game. That's why the focus, even though they kind of say anti-religious bias, they clarify and they're like, yeah, but we're talking about anti-Christian bias. Like, Christians are singled out for special treatment. So if you want to go after Muslims and atheists, now's the time to do it because those complaints are not going to be taken seriously. Christians get top billing here. And again, I know I said this in the subtitle, but one of the State Department officials said it's very Handmaid's Tale-esque because that person wasn't allowed to even speak about it, so they had to do so anonymously. Now, if any of this sounds familiar to you, it's not because it's a repeat story. It's because like a month or two ago, maybe in February, Donald Trump issued an executive order for the Justice Department to form a task force to eliminate anti-Christian bias in the federal government. And that executive order, as I mentioned in a previous video, it had examples about anti-Christian bias, but when you actually dug through those stories, you realize those weren't examples of anti-Christian bias. Those are stories where Christians got punished, not because they were Christian, but because they were violating the law or because they were just being assholes in other ways. It's not because people oppose their faith. And so this State Department executive order is just kind of following what Donald Trump told them to do. Root out anti-Christian bias at the expense of all the other problems these agencies have. So this isn't really about getting rid of anti-Christian bias. It's a symbolic move to reinforce Christian supremacy. If you want a real example, though, of a Christian getting harassed for their beliefs, you don't have to look that far back. Do you remember, like, the day of Trump's inauguration? Like, Trump went to a church service, and the bishop there was Marianne Buddy, and she politely asked Trump to follow Jesus and have mercy on the marginalized. And how did Republicans respond to that? Well, from the Washington Post, here's what they said. It was Buddy's sermon that appeared to strike a nerve, circulating online after the service. Representative Mike Collins, a Republican from Georgia, wrote on X, the person giving this sermon should be added to the deportation list for just saying, hey, maybe you should follow Jesus. That's anti-Christian bias right there. Also, where are you going to deport her to? She's from New Jersey. Republicans also implied she was an idiot and that she's bad at her job. If you want another example of anti-Christian bias, maybe you could point to this story. Turns out Christian immigrants who helped elect Trump are now at risk of being deported. Even though they're Christian, they thought that would protect them. Turns out, sorry, you're brown. Get out of here. Like, those are far more direct examples. I don't even think this one is anti-Christian. It's just, you're an immigrant. They don't care if you're Christian. But the point is, these are actual examples of, like, Marianne Buddy getting attacked for her faith than anything you will find as a result of this executive order from Marco Rubio or Donald Trump. Like, if you want to protect Christianity, you know what you need to do? Get rid of all the people in the administration who make Christianity look bad, which is damn near everybody. And none of this, by the way, is to say I'm okay with anti-Christian bias. I'm not. I think anti-Christian bias should be punished. And so should all the other kinds of religious or anti-religious bias. Like, if it happens in a government agency, we should go after it. There's no room for that in the government. The problem here is the underlying theory that Christians suffer more discrimination than other religious groups, and that's why that needs to be eradicated, even if the method by which administration officials are going to learn about this, it just destroys morale inside the agency, because apparently anything counts as anti-Christian bias. Like, oh no, that Muslim looked at me the wrong way. We must end that person's job. Like, what are they going to say? That is what I'm looking forward to. This is one of those stories where I don't know if it's going to be in the headlines a week from now when they have their meeting about it, but I would be very curious to know what examples they uncover of anti-Christian bias. Because I promise you there are none. I would be shocked if there was an example of anti-Christian bias. I'll look for it. I'm not holding out hope, but I'm sure they're going to try to make an example of anything they can latch onto. All right, what questions do we have here? And then we will get to the tweets. How soon till the portal gets flooded with the script to the B movie? That would be so funny. I hope people in the State Department start flooding that complaint zone with the dumbest shit just to make someone have to sift through all the BS, because you're not going to find anything legitimate in there. So make them work for it. Yes, do the B movie. Put scripts to anything. Make up stories, because what are they going to do? Follow up on it? Of course not. There we go. Let's try that one more time. Dan, you'll give me a timestamp for that. We'll fix that. What other questions we got here? Anything that they decide is anti-Christian is it. They make the rules. That's what I'm afraid of. Like, they're going to count anything they want as anti-Christian bias, and that's why you can't take it seriously. And that does worry. What are they going to say counts that way? Yeah. Sorry, I don't know what's going on. I'm not anti-Christian. I'm live and let live. Yes. I mean, that's the way I am too. Like, I don't want to see anti-Christian bias in the government, but I'm also well aware that Christians are not the victims of bias in this government and this administration especially. But again, let's go after all of it. Why are you singling out Christians? It's because that's the only group they actually care about. All right, I think we are going to the tweets now. These are things I may have tweeted over the last week that I've totally forgotten about at this point. And Den has compiled them. Let's see what we got, Den. What do we have this week? I'm going to zoom in here. It would appear CNN was also at a eugenics conference. Why are all these mainstream news organizations at a 200-person event where the speakers are eugenicists and racists? And historian Kevin Cruz points out, in Chicago, 1500s. Oh, I'm sorry. So the story here is that CNN covered a conference where there were all these people talking about how important it was to have babies, and it is effing weird. But also, as Kevin Cruz points out, 1,500 historians gathered for a conference where they discussed the fate of democracy. I guess if we add some horny Nazis next year, maybe CNN will cover it. I mean, this is the thing that is constantly annoying. Like, these people are mad that CNN covered an event, but also it is kind of interesting because it is the belief that Elon Musk has, and he's very powerful. Meanwhile, you have actual historians getting together to discuss a very pertinent issue, and the media is totally absent for that. I felt the same way about a lot of those protests. There was a major protest 2 weeks ago on the streets across the country where people were protesting this government, like in all 50 states, and the lack of coverage those protests received compared to the size of those protests was unbelievable. And by the way, I think they're doing it again this weekend, this Saturday, more protests around the country. Bring your signs, go there. But will the media cover it? It's very much of a tree falls in the woods and no one hears it. Is there a sound? Whatever that saying is. Sometimes, yes, things get covered that may not have that much attraction. If you have a flat earth conference that 5 people attend, that's going to draw attention because people are like, what the hell is wrong with these people? Meanwhile, you have academics trying to get attention for this stuff and no one's listening to anything they're saying. And that's a media problem as much as anything else. But I do want CNN to be at this pro-natalist conference because that's a belief that a lot of conservative Republicans have, which is let's have as many babies as possible. Who cares if we take care of them? Just have them. That's a very Elon Musk belief right there. Oh my God. RFK Jr. gave a speech this week where he talked about how he spread these lies about what causes autism. He is under the belief that vaccines do it. Obviously, that's not true. There is no evidence of that. Scientists who studied this stuff know there is no evidence of that. But RFK Jr. is a very dumb person. So he lies about this stuff. And one of the things he did during his speech that was appalling, besides just spreading that lie, is he made it sound like if you are anywhere on the autism spectrum, you cannot function in society. And this is what he said. These are kids who will never pay taxes. They will never hold a job. They will never play baseball. They will never write a poem. They will never go out on a date. Many of them will never use a toilet unassisted. We have to recognize we are doing this to our children. And the implication is by vaccinating them. And the thing is, no, like if you are severely autistic, there are limitations to what you could do. However, most people with autism are not there. And as this person responded, hi, I'm autistic and I'm mayor of my city. And I saw in response to what RFK Jr. also said, you had people chiming in, I'm autistic and this is what I do with my life. My child is autistic and this is the amazing stuff they have done. And it doesn't matter. Like, do you remember there was a time when Richard Dawkins has done this. They asked him in the past, what would you recommend to a parent who realizes she's about to give birth to a baby with Down syndrome? And I think Richard Dawkins, again, this is off the top of my head, don't quote me on this. Richard Dawkins said something like, I would abort it. And a bunch of people chimed in and they're like, how heartless of you. My child has Down syndrome and this is what they are doing. And I love my child and this is the family. This is part of my family and how dare you? And I totally get that reaction from them. And here is RFK Jr. saying, if you're autistic, you're basically worthless. And that's why he then says, we need to study vaccines and make sure you don't get those. And it's like, not only are you wrong about the science, you are insulting an entire group of people for a thing that is very common, relatively speaking. And he's just wrong about it. He doesn't know what he's talking about, but Republicans will not call him out on it. Unbelievable. This is a thing I did with the Freedom from Religion Foundation. I'm not a fan of that photo, but there you go. I posed for it, whatever. But this week, the Freedom from Religion Foundation, their members, their staff and we had a long discussion about the Pew Research Center's recent religious landscape survey and what is the state of religion across the country. There is the headlines that we saw from that say Christianity's decline appears to have stopped and the rise of the nuns has plateaued. And is that really the case? We spent an hour talking about what that survey really says. So if you're interested, you could search that title. Thank you, Den. You could click on this link on YouTube and you could watch that discussion we had. I thought it was an interesting conversation. I hope you check it out. Oh my God. You got to watch this conversation. It's a very short clip, but just the question that Steve Deese, I don't listen to him enough to know how to pronounce his last name, but he asked Mark Driscoll, the insane preacher, hey, what's the best evidence for the resurrection of Jesus? Because, it's Easter weekend. And this is what Mark Driscoll said. You could play this.
The best overall evidence for the resurrection, what would you say it is?
The existence of the Christian church.
Yeah, the Bible is true because the Bible says the Bible is true. Or as a lot of the memes responded, the Bible is true because this napkin I just wrote on says the Bible is true. Like, that's not evidence. That's just proof that the meme has worked. The Christian meme has carried. The existence of the church is not evidence for the resurrection. It just means a whole bunch of people fell for a really good story. But that's Mark Driscoll for you. And the people who follow Mark Driscoll are gullible enough to fall for that as an explanation. What else we got here?
The best.
Oh my God. How infuriating is this? So the British Supreme Court, I probably mischaracterized it in this tweet, but they basically said anti-discrimination laws that protect women, they don't apply to trans women. And that we're still waiting to figure out how that's actually going to be applicable in the UK or in Britain. Like, is that going to mean they can't use public toilets that correspond with their gender? Does that mean they can't play certain sports? I'm not sure, but it will make the lives of trans people a lot harder. And what was Richard Dawkins' reaction? It's a triumph of science and common sense. Yeah, the science was settled in the Precambrian. Nice that the law has finally caught up. Nothing makes Richard Dawkins happier than watching trans people suffer. It's the same as J.K. Rowling. It's the same as Jerry Coyne. All of those skeptics who just really hate trans people and that's their whole identity now, they were so happy about this. Meanwhile, the UK, the Humanist UK, they condemned this decision by the court. A lot of LGBTQ activists obviously condemned the ruling. And again, I'm worried that this is where we're heading to, that the US Supreme Court is going to make something like this happen too. And not just piecemeal, like they can't play sports, but basically try to eradicate trans people from public life altogether. That's what Republicans want to do at this point. And because a lot of Americans don't really understand trans issues, it's very easy to rile them up about this stuff. That's why failed swimmers like Riley Gaines still are super popular in Republican circles, because all they do is say, hey, I'm leading the charge to really hate trans people. And a bunch of bigots are like, yes, I'm going to get on board with this. So disappointing, but not surprising. Okay. I made a video a while back about this book that you could see Drew holding there. It's called The War on Science. A bunch of the new atheist authors and other scientists and communicators are writing this book called The War on Science. And I made a video about this weeks ago where, you could make a book. You could write a book about the war on science, about what the Trump administration is doing to decimate research and defund scientific institutions in our country. They are destroying science education right now. And what are these idiots writing about? Like, we give science funding to Black people, and how dare we? That's DEI. We can't have that. So it's just a dumb book. And it hasn't even been released. They've released the table of contents, but even that gives you enough information to know what they're writing about. Anyway, I made a video about it. Drew asked me if we could make a version of that video for his channel, so I helped write the script for it. And he made a video that it looks fantastic. It has so many great visuals for you to look at. And last I checked, which might have been yesterday, that video is getting a ton of views. So I hope it's getting out to more people. But I'm really proud of the way he made that video, and I hope you check it out. And if that YouTube link that Den is providing here, if you can't find that, just check out Genetically Modified Skeptic. That's Drew's channel, and you could see that video. Again, I thought it was really well made. Oh, yes. I make bi-weekly Slate crosswords, and you could check those out. Again, those are, if you're a member of the Slate membership program, I believe you can do all of them, but I think even if you're not, you could do most of them for free. Check out the crosswords. They're fun. They're not hard to do. I was proud of this one. This is the clue for 24 Across. Guests receiving mild pushback on This Is Gavin Newsom. And spoiler, 24 Across is bigots. I was proud of myself for that clue. Because again, they let me get away with whatever clues I want with some restraint. But I like that clue. I was proud of it. So anyway, thanks, Den. Do the puzzles. They're great. Cool. Okay, I'm going to tell you a story about this. So a couple of years ago, you know that link tree where you could have 1 million links so you don't have to link them all individually to your like Twitter profile? So years ago, I made this list like everyone else did. And at some point I put an Easter egg in there. I put that in there, OnlyFans, because I'm like, no one's going to click on it because I don't think anyone's going to even check out my link tree. But I put it in there. And if you click on it, what happens is it goes to my Patreon page. I do not have an OnlyFans. I'm sorry. But here's the thing. I'm like, I think if someone actually goes through the hassle of clicking on my Linktree profile and finds that and they're like, what? And they click on it and they realize it goes to Patreon, I think they'll get a kick out of it. They will find it funny and they will point it out and we'll all have a good laugh. Let me tell you what actually happened. And Den, I don't know if you have this because I didn't know you were going to do this, but there is a right-wing atheist who saw what you are seeing on your screen right there and tried to accuse me of doing things that I'm sorry, I just don't do publicly in any sort of way. And clearly, he did not click on the link to get the joke. So he tried to make a big deal of the fact that I have this secret page. And I'm like, dude, you missed the joke. Click on the link. You will understand. And he never did. He was just so out to get me. It was so freaking funny because it just shows you how little research any of these right-wing atheists actually do. It's still there, by the way. That link is still there and it goes to the same place. I haven't changed it because I don't think anyone else has found it. What else we got? All right, that's it. Thank you all for sticking around tonight. I appreciate it. And I can't do any of this without Den, so I appreciate that too. And next week, I will be back on Thursday as well. I hope you can join me then. And that's it. Have a wonderful night, everybody.